Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're undertaking a really fascinating exercise together. We're essentially going to treat this session like a masterclass on documentary scriptwriting. But instead of staring at dry, boring templates, we're going to build a hypothetical documentary from scratch. And we are using the ultimate secretive case study to do it: the myths, the history, and the highly classified realities of Area 51.
Now, you might be wondering, how do you actually script a true story about a place that officially didn't even exist for decades? Well, that's your creative challenge here. It's all about taking raw, highly classified facts, separating them from the wild fiction, and turning the whole thing into a narrative that totally captivates an audience, all without ever sacrificing the truth.
Of course, every great documentary starts with thorough research. You've really got to immerse yourself in the setting, and our raw material today is literally the most secretive patch of desert on planet Earth, Groom Lake, Nevada. Established back in 1955, it's a place fortified by just extreme security, where the U.S. government tested experimental aircraft during the height of the Cold War. That is our backdrop.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Choosing a narration style.
Before writing a single word of your script, you have to decide exactly how the story is going to be told. To wrap our heads around this, let's look at one of the most incredible pieces of reality surrounding Area 51. The government actually operates a highly classified fleet of passenger planes, hiding right in plain sight at Las Vegas's Harry Reid International Airport. They're completely unmarked Boeing 737s, except for this one single red stripe along the windows. The unofficial name for this fleet? Janet Airlines. It's widely joked that it stands for just another non-existent terminal. I mean, imagine the irony here. A top-secret military shuttle operating right out of a bustling civilian airport, running up to 190 flights a week.
So how do we actually expose the secrets of those Janet 737s? Based on core documentary filmmaking principles, we basically have 4 narration styles to choose from. Interview-led builds the story entirely from subject quotes. Narrator-led uses an unseen voice, think Morgan Freeman guiding us from above. Presenter-led puts a journalist or filmmaker right there in the airport terminal. And finally, observational-led, where we just act as a fly on the wall, simply watching passengers board these unmarked planes without a single word of commentary. So which approach would you choose to draw your viewer in?
Moving right along to Section 2, reviewing the raw footage.
Once you've locked in your style, you step into the shoes of the filmmaker who has to review the raw footage and transcripts to actually find the story. And reviewing footage isn't just mindlessly watching video. You're actively hunting for characters with clear wants, needs, and obstacles. In our Area 51 documentary, the primary obstacle is massive: extreme government secrecy, enforced by very strict warnings and the very real threat of imprisonment. As a storyteller, you use this secrecy because it creates the absolute perfect vacuum for myths to grow.
And let's be real, no myth is bigger than Bob Lazar. Back in 1989, Lazar claimed he worked at a secret facility called S4, near Area 51, literally reverse engineering alien flying saucers powered by Element 115. He is a phenomenal character study. However, as an impartial filmmaker, you have to weigh those claims against documented reality. AI analysis of his story reveals no verified academic records from MIT or Caltech where he claimed to have degrees. Furthermore, Element 115 was actually written about in a Scientific American article just weeks before Lazar went public with his story. You have to present these contradictions to the audience.
And this brilliantly illustrates how truth is often stranger, and sometimes, honestly, more mundane than fiction. Just look at the stark contrast between the myth and the reality of Cold War testing. UFO sightings spiked in the 1950s because the CIA was testing the incredibly sleek U-2 spy plane at 60,000 feet. Its silver body reflected the sun, making it look exactly like a glowing saucer from below. Meanwhile, the military's actual attempt to build a flying saucer, Project 1794, the Avro vehicle, was just this clunky, unstable terrestrial experiment that totally failed and was canceled in 1961.
The data backs this up perfectly, by the way. When the U.S. Air Force established Operation Blue Book to investigate UFO reports, investigators ultimately concluded that the U-2 spy plane and its successor, the A-12 Oxcart, were responsible for more than 50% of all UFO sightings reported during that era. It wasn't aliens, it was classified stealth technology.
Which brings us to Section 3, structuring the 3 acts. Now that we have these incredible historical facts laid out, we need a narrative spine to hold it all together. The most reliable tool for this is the foundational 3-act structure. We can use a timeline to plot out our story beats. By organizing our raw data chronologically, we transform disjointed facts into a really compelling historical arc. We start in 1955 with the base's establishment, escalate in 1972 with the logistics of the Janet flights, and hit a massive cultural climax in 1989 when Bob Lazar blows the doors off the secrecy, changing the public perception of the base forever.
Here is a highly actionable template of how that timeline maps directly to our structure. Act 1, taking up about 25% of our script, sets up the base and the high Cold War stakes. Act 2, the bulky middle 50%, builds all the tension. Soviet satellites trying to spy on the base, the accidental UFO sightings, and the explosive myths generated by people like Lazar. Finally, Act 3, the last 25%, resolves the narrative by revealing the declassified truths we actually know today.
All right, let's get to the fun part. Section 4, writing the AV script.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly how professionals put this all together using the AV script format. This is an essential tool that basically forces you to think about picture and sound simultaneously. Notice how this two-column formatting works in practice. Over on the left, we map out the visual, a silver U-2 plane soaring at 60,000 feet. On the right, we script the audio, the narration delivering the historical payoff, explaining exactly how the sunlight hit the metal, tricking commercial pilots down below into believing they were seeing a glowing, otherworldly object.
When you're writing that right-hand audio column, you absolutely have to remember the golden rule. Complement, don't compete. The voiceover must add context. If you're showing the U-2 plane, you don't need to say, "Here is a plane." The audience already knows that. Instead, use the narration to explain the intense Cold War stakes that necessitated flying a plane that high in the first place. Work with the visuals, not against them.
And finally, we reach Section 5, the final cut.
As we prepare for post-production, the single biggest mistake to avoid is falling in love with your footage. Just because a detail is incredibly cool doesn't mean it actually belongs in the final cut. For instance, Bob Lazar mentioned a high-tech hand scanner used at the base. It's a great sci-fi detail for sure, but if it doesn't serve the actual truth of your core narrative about military secrecy, you have to be ruthless and cut it. You must also avoid overwriting your narration, and whatever you do, never ignore that 3-act structure we just spent all that time building. By combining rigorous research with a thoughtfully structured narrative style, you can take a topic shrouded in mystery and misinformation as Area 51 and distill it into an explainer that is both factual and completely thrilling. So, taking these documentary tools we've discussed today, I leave you with this final thought. What kind of story are you going to uncover and tell next?